I like my job because when you go home, you know you made a difference.
Because it's just happy. It's nice knowing it's a very rewarding job. Very rewarding when you've helped. It could be like the tiniest thing that you've helped someone with, but it's like massive to them. Just
Generally making that difference, because like I say, some people don't see anybody, or they've got a son that lives 40 miles away that comes on a Wednesday, you know, and that's all they see in general. And it's just nice that you made a bit of a difference to them, you know, conversation, chat.
They are brilliant. Richard, the carer there, and Leah, the carer there, they are absolutely brilliant. I can't fault them.
It can be a very stressful job, but on the other hand, you get more rewards out of it than you do stressfulness. And it's nice going to service users and they smile at you. You made the day. If they walk in and they smile at you, you know you've done something right.
I actually did something completely different before, but because I looked after my grandma a lot, so it like enforced me to go in and help other people. So I thought if I could do it for my grandma, I'd do it for everyone else. And best job I've had so far, to be honest.
Come in and I might be feeling a bit low, and Richard will say, "Good morning, Doris," and I'll say, "Good morning, Richard, good morning, Leah." And I might be feeling a bit low, and then all of a sudden, them just saying them words, "Good morning," and "How are you today?" And they cheer me up. Really, really lovely.
It's like a lot of people, I think, oh God, caring, I couldn't do that. But community is so much different. Like, some people will just go and see it to have a chat with them because they're lonely and they just want to see someone through the day. It's not all like just all physical work. Sometimes it's social and interacting with them. It is quite flexible. I mean, I don't have to dedicate, if I wanted to dedicate my life to it, you can, but you don't always have to as well.
Sometimes I feel like I could put my arms around them and cuddle them because they're that good. And anybody that says they ain't, come and see me, I tell you.
So are we starting YouTube? All good. Thumbs up. So we are now live on YouTube. As you probably have guessed, I am not the lovely John Cotty. Unfortunately, John Cotty is not very well at the moment, so I'm filling for him as his vice chairman. You'll also notice that Adrian Smith looks slightly different, and Adrian is being filled in by Derek as well. So new top table today.
Isn't it? Oh, I don't see quite like that.
So welcome everyone to the committee. Welcome to members of the public watching at home as well. A particular welcome to Councillor Debbie Darby, who is joining this committee as a new member as of today. So again, just bear in mind the committee is being broadcast live on YouTube, so please do not swear. And also make sure that you speak into your microphones and turn them on when you are speaking. We're also joined by, I think, Adrian Smith, who will be watching remotely as well from home. So with that, then we'll crack on with the meeting. So agenda item 1, minutes of the last meeting held on the 26th of January 2022. Do members agree that the minutes are a true record? Yes. All good. Spot on. So far, so good. Item 2, agenda item 2, apologies for absence. We have a number of absences and substitutions today. Pete, do you want to?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Cotty. Councillor Barnfather replaces Councillor Cotty, and Councillor Neil Clark replaces Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, both for this meeting only. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. So now we'll go on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Do any members or officers have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any private interests or non-pecuniary interests? Quick question, Derek, on that. Obviously, we as members are tied to a lot of these applications on the local communities fund. Do we need to declare that, or is that just assumed as part of the course?
I think that's part of just your general being a councillor.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, Glyn.
Chairman, I'm a council nominee onto the board of Inspire, but obviously the Inspire Learning annual plan and fees was at a committee I sit on and also at the main board, and I have actually voted on those issues, and John has himself as well. So I just don't. Are we still, because we're nominated by the county council, are we still okay to vote on that, or do I have to?
No, my understanding is you're still fine to vote. So I think you're right to declare the interest, so it's out in the open. But yeah, you're fine to vote and contribute to the debate.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Guilford. So that is agenda item 3. So we'll move on then to agenda item 4. So if I before we start, if I move the motion, which is on page 11 of the agenda pack. And the motion is that this committee endorses the performance and financial outcomes in respect of the Council Services for Communities Committee for the period 1st of October to the 31st of December 2021. If I could have a seconder as well, please.
Yeah, formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. So then we will hand over to, I think it's you, Mark, you delivering the presentation on this.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Morning all. So yeah, in front of you, as ever, you have the latest quarterly performance report. Hopefully, it gives a good sense of the achievements made between the 1st of October and the end of December. As ever, we're happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Short and sweet. Does any members have any questions for Mark on the report?
Yeah, just an overall general. Obviously, due to COVID, we can see that there is a significant number of overspends relating to the performance report, and clearly, just identifying the one catering services, which is the largest. And I know it's not your area, although you do deal with food. It's not your area as such. But the £820,000 impact that we've had due to COVID, the council did get 62, I think it's about 62 million in overall grant fund from the government direct, and that was ring-fenced money, as I understand it, and it was there to support services. And I just wondered whether actually that money has been utilised across some of those areas where, you know, clearly they're not areas where it was our particular fault. I suppose you could argue about the business for the trading standards, but even on that, you've not done too bad. When you read on the report later on, you've caught up. You know, you've done very well, in fact, I would say. But I just thinking, you know, surely that wouldn't have been an underspend, and we should have been able to use some of that money to write that off.
Thank you, Councillor. Derek, can I get you to come back on this?
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Guilford. Yeah, so it's a reasonable question to ask, and the way that we'll deal with the question of how we utilise the national level COVID monies that we've had to help support services that have been, as has particularly catering and our FM service been affected by COVID, because it's obviously affected the customer base because schools have been closed for significant parts of the year, is that we'll net that off with those monies at the end of the financial year. So it will be wrapped up in the council's final accounting process. So what you're seeing here is the kind of live picture, not the end of year reconciled picture, if that's helpful.
That's fine. I think, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any more comments or questions or queries? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Just looking at the core data set around the libraries. I mean, overall, I want to welcome the report. I do think it's quite a good report, and I'm with the breakdown of the numbers under paragraph 11. I am delighted to see that across the vast majority of the categories, we are overhitting our targets in regards to engagement. Obviously, it's something I've spoken about before at this committee. I am still worried that our physical visits are only about half of the target that we set. I am a big proponent for physical library visits. I'm actually a little bit sad that Councillor Cotty couldn't be here today, because I know he made an announcement in regards to library provision during the budget meeting last week, which thank you to the administration for guaranteeing that provision. However, I did know, and I appreciate this is a question you might not be able to answer, Councillor Smith, but shortly after, obviously, Councillor Girling spoke about moving some provisions into the new development at Top Wiggate, and I wanted to know how that affects the libraries, because obviously the two closest library provisions to that will be Kirkby Library, which affects obviously myself and members of my group, and the library provisions at Hucknall, which again disproportionately affects the residents in Ashfield. Are we likely to see a movement of those provisions to the new developments, or are the library services in Kirkby and Hucknall going to be guaranteed in their towns for the foreseeable future?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll answer first before going, I think, to Peter, if you just want to pick up on some of the numbers of the libraries afterwards. So just for those of you who are unfamiliar with this remarks Councillor Williamson referenced, Councillor Cotty in full council basically made a pledge on behalf of the administration that we wouldn't be closing libraries. We would be maintaining our library provision across the county. So, Councillor Williamson, no, there's no plans to move the libraries from Hucknall into the development at Top Wiggate. There's no plans for that at all. And again, I will just kind of re-emphasise what Councillor Cotty said, in that we have no plans to change our library provision. We want to keep that and secure that, and that is our pledge as an administration, as a committee, as a leadership, whichever kind of phrasing you want to use. So no, there are no plans to move library provision up to Top Wiggate.
Sorry, just for absolute clarity, because you mentioned no plans to move Hucknall's provision. Did you mean Hucknall and Kirkby as well? Just for clarity.
Yes, yeah, we have no plans. There's no plans on the table to make any of these moves. What Councillor Cotty said beforehand was, obviously, if proposals arise, obviously we look at proposals, but that was a catch-all statement for anything in the county. That's not about specific proposals. Or you know, anything like that. As I say, there's no proposals on the table for that. Just to be very rambly clear. In terms of the library visits, again, I'll move on to Peter in a second, but the reason they are down, obviously, as we all know, is purely because of COVID, and it's gradually getting people back into kind of the pre-COVID norms. If people are told for 2 years, stay at home, don't go out, obviously, culturally, it's quite hard to then breach that and for people to, you know, to feel safe to go back into the norms. And I think the library service is doing very well in getting people back out there, but it won't happen overnight. But Peter, if you want to come into that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's probably just worth highlighting some of the challenges. So yes, it is about confidence. It's about our capacity during the pandemic to manage the number of visits. But as you point out, there's an improvement in physical visits. At the same time, the use of our virtual services is carried out at a high level. So the overall engagement, I think, is really encouraging. We've got a whole range of recovery actions and plans that are working their way through. So this Friday, our learning team are meeting to talk about recovery in terms of getting people in to do learning provision, and then in May we've got 2 separate staff conferences with library staff, and that's around re-engaging with community across the piece. So there's lots of pieces of work. The statistics, of course, there's other statistics. So we could report. We've never traditionally reported here on our book loan statistics. So if you use them as a proxy of activity, actually they're in some of our libraries they're back to 100% pre-COVID. Most are above 85% of pre-COVID. And then also, if you look at a benchmarking against national figures, Nottinghamshire is not an outlier. We're slightly ahead of the curve, both in terms of speed of recovery and returning services to normal. So I think it does come to, it's a mixed picture around why we're not meeting the target. We know it's because of COVID, but that recovery rate, we're confident will carry on through this calendar year.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Williamson? Spot on. So any more questions from committee? Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, just to re-emphasise the point that you've made on behalf of the administration, Councillor Cotty is very explicit at the budget meeting that there will be no reduction in library services across Nottinghamshire. No reduction across Nottinghamshire. He was very clear, and I'm amazed really that did not seem to be taken up by all members in the chamber on the day, and indeed I've read some nonsense, I think it's in the Hucknall Advertiser, suggesting from a member in this chamber that we had some intentions to close libraries in the Ashfield area. That is not the case. The Chair again has made that very clear. I'm hoping, Councillor Williamson, that you do exactly the same at Ashfield District Council and with your colleagues. The caveat that Councillor Cotty put in was that in the event of, effectively, if lightning struck a library building, we may have to move it from that building to another building, but it would be another building which would be in the immediate vicinity. There are no plans, no intentions to move the library service from Hucknall, Kirkby, or indeed anywhere else to the Top Wiggy site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Councillor Guilford, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was obviously I sit on Inspire. Clearly, when our administration, we had the full support of the opposition, and they have our full support whilst ever they keep libraries open, and always have that. That's something that we've shared, and Councillor Costier has always said that. That is something that this council chamber has shared, that we want to keep libraries open. And again, Councillor Girling was asked yesterday about the Top Wiggy site. I've never heard of that site before in my life, or wished I hadn't. But at the end of the day, what he did say was exactly what Councillor Barnfather finished off with, was that there are some libraries occasionally that come into either disrepair or whatever, or aren't fit for purpose, whether that's for accessibility, through disability, discrimination, or whatever else, where they would have to reconsider that building and where it is currently located. But what he did say is that we would find somewhere where we would keep existing libraries going. Now, whether that alludes to that they're going to move one to Top Wiggy or whatever else, as I understand it, there are no intentions to do that at this point in time. But you may have got that little glass ball that tells you something different. But clearly, we wouldn't support that. Any closure of any library, we've always supported keeping them open, and any administration would look at their buildings and make sure that they're fit for purpose. And I'm sure that in reality, we'd like to probably go back to the times when there were more libraries about, located in little pockets and little villages so that people could look, but that's not feasible these days. But no, I just wanted to clarify what was made clear yesterday in the Economic Development Committee. And I'm sure it'll be raised in Cabinet and full council again.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any more comments, questions? No, all good. If I can just use this position just to be slightly parochial as well. I was at Blidworth Library recently, and I found that as the groups that use the library as their base are starting to return, that is naturally kind of bringing people back with them. So I think as these groups start to return, we will hopefully, Peter, start to see these numbers kind of continue to bulk as well. So if there's no more questions, we've had a motion proposed and seconded. So if we move to the vote, all those in favour? I think that's, oh no. Yeah, that's unanimous, spot on. So that passes, clearly. Fantastic, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is update on key trading standards and community matters. So Fiona, you'll take this report, won't you? But just beforehand, if I can remember to move the recommendations. So pages 21 and page 22. Those recommendations are that this committee considers the updates and highlights any actions required specifically in respect of income generation, approves the proposed food and feed plan, and approve the proposed pricing structure for services for the forthcoming financial year. So that's the proposal. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman. If I can formally second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather, and I'll hand over to you, Fiona.
Good morning, thank you. Well, you've just read out the 3 recommendations to this report, but the first, as you say, is to consider the included updates for trading standards and communities and highlight any actions required by the service, particularly in respect of income generation. The second recommendation is asking that the attached proposed food and feed plan for 22-23 is approved. This plan is required by the Food Standards Agency to ensure that national priorities and standards are delivered by the local authority. Food standards work is the responsibility of the County Council's Trading Standards Service, whilst food hygiene work is the responsibility of the District Council's Environmental Health Services. Trading Standards has sole responsibility for carrying out the official controls in relation to animal feeds. These controls cover areas such as storage, transportation, composition, labelling and contamination. The plan shows how the service adopts an intelligence-led approach to enforcement and carries out an inspection programme based on risk. Both areas of work are funded from pre-existing resources within the service. The third recommendation relates to seeking approval for a flexible pricing structure that the service employs when it provides a range of services to businesses, other local authorities and government agencies. The model allows for the scope to make attractive price offers to businesses and others based on relevant market conditions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Fiona. Just before I hand over to members of the committee, Fiona, I wonder if it might be useful just to expand slightly on bird flu, the avian influenza. Obviously, there's been an outbreak certainly near my division in Newstead Abbey, which falls in Councillor Barnfather's division as well. So certainly we're both interested in it. A couple of weeks back, I had a resident that got in touch with me wanting to know about some of the regulations which Mark dealt with, but I think it might be useful if you just kind of explain to members the process of if we get residents that are concerned about bird flu or kind of regulations, what they should do and where they should go with that.
Yeah, that's fine. So at the moment, I'm touching wood, hopefully, that we haven't got any avian influenza within the county at all at the moment. As you say, there's been some outbreaks at Newstead Abbey. There's been some at Kingsmill Reservoir as well, where wild birds have attracted the condition and they've died from it. But because they're wild birds, then it doesn't mean that any other resources need to be put into place to deal with any of the incidents. We haven't had any domestic flocks, as I say, attract avian flu at the moment. There was a potential outbreak within the city, because we cover the animal health services for the city. That was in a domestic flock in a backyard, but the birds haven't. They've been found not to have had avian flu. So if anyone makes a complaint about birds wandering free at the moment, domestic birds, then we would go and give them some advice. Contact the owner of the birds, advise them that they need to be kept in and what sort of conditions they need to be keeping their birds in to not get avian flu, basically. So we are responding to any complaints we get, and we are advising the public and owners of domestic flocks alike. So anything can come to us.
Thank you, Fiona. So as a committee, we're now all obliged to tap our heads twice and tap wood. So any questions for Fiona? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following straight on from that, where I live, which is near the Grantham Canal, there have been quite a few wild birds have died as a result of swans and particularly, and some ducks. I just wonder, are there any regulations in place, or is there any guidance or whatever regarding the public's interaction with wild birds? Principally, I'm thinking in terms of a lot of people go down and feed the swans and the ducks and the birds, etc. Is there any change or restriction to that?
What we're saying to the public is obviously don't touch any dead birds at all. That DEFRA will do their controls that they need to do with any dead birds. So the message to the public is you can carry on interacting, as you say, with birds, live ones, but don't touch any dead ones. That's what we're saying. And if there has been instances like there is at Kingsmill Reservoir, for example, and Newstead Abbey, people are putting posters up to, warn the public about that. But that's all the controls there are at the moment.
Thank you, Fiona. Are you happy with that, Councillor Clark? Councillor Williamson, did you?
Thank you, Chair. It flows on so nicely because it's about avian flu as well, and obviously you mentioned Kingsmill Res, and obviously the advice from DEFRA is to still interact with the wild but not go near any dead ones. I mean, we sadly did have an incident or two of Kingsmill Res of some rather idiotic young men taking selfies with the birds, which obviously not only is in appallingly poor taste, but probably puts themselves quite a lot at risk as well. But that is advice we have from them. But really, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Train Standards and the Animal Disease Team for all the fantastic work that you have done at Kingsmill Res. I know it's not been an easy situation, so just a big thank you from myself to you for all the work that you've done with us there.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Do we have any more? Councillor Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. I must say mine's not about birds. I wouldn't hurt a bird, but I'm not a bird lover. But I just want to raise something in point 5 and 6. We as the County Council are always advising the vulnerable people about people who make doorstep calls and phone calls and try and force people to pay money through a scam. The other thing that's being raised at the moment, and I feel is quite important for us to get the message out, although it's fairly obvious, a lot of people have oil and for heating. And I've had 3 or 4 emails where people have suspected they might have had an oil theft, but at the same time, they think because it's been cold, they might have used too much oil. So I'm not quite sure. But the obvious thing is to padlock those tanks, because oil has nearly doubled in price. It's a very valuable commodity, and I think we might be receiving calls soon that people are having theft of oil. So I think if we're putting out messages, it might just be a good reminder to suggest that people do lock their tanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Fiona, would you like to come in perhaps on what we can do or are doing for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, that we can put in any preventative messages we put out about scams. And obviously, if we are going to see fuel prices increasing, etc., then there will be people that want to come in on the back of that and, you know, try and rip people off.
Just as a side point, a friend of mine ordered 700 litres of heating oil in January, and it was £450. She ordered 700 litres this week, and it was £750. So it has nearly doubled.
Thank you, Councillor Saddington. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I take this opportunity to thank Fiona Needham and the team at Trading Standards, who are dealing with an emotionally charged case at the moment in Brinsley regarding a cowboy builder. So the feedback that I've had from the resident is that the team have been brilliant and utterly professional. So I'd like to pass on my personal thanks for dealing with that. The only concern is that this particular case, they struggled to get the contact details of the Trading Standards. So could I ask that a bit of thought is given into how we can improve getting that information out there? Thank you. And then moving on to paragraph 28, which talks about the Armed Forces Bill. In a previous Transport and Environment Committee before Christmas, my colleagues John Wilmot and Tom Hollis had an amendment accepted that asked for a feasibility study into giving ex-Armed Forces personnel free off-peak bus travel. This fits in with the Armed Forces Bill and the Covenant. So can I ask that the Chairman uses his influence to get this feasibility study completed to help ensure our ex-service personnel get free off-peak travel and better access to services? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Fiona, in terms of the contact details, I don't know if it might be worth just a general email to all members, just kind of reminding of the routes to go down with contact emails. I think we'd probably all find that handy. Councillor Williamson, in terms of the amendment and the committee, unfortunately, I wasn't in that committee, but I'm happy to look into it and see what I can find. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to come back, Fiona, to avian flu. I just wanted a bit of clarity because we had mention of DEFRA, we had mention of our county council obligations. Just for anybody who might be having a quiet morning and is listening into this committee, obviously Newstead Abbey Park is the local park for many residents from Ravenshead. You get a season ticket because effectively it's on the doorstep. So it is a Nottingham City Council attraction, feature, call it what you may, that sits within Nottinghamshire and within my division. You mentioned the fact that the county council have a responsibility or a contract with the city to deal with issues. Does that apply merely to captive birds, or does that apply to wild birds as well? What's DEFRA's role in it? If one of my residents is walking through Newstead Abbey and sees a dead bird, swan, whatever, I would hope that they have the common sense not to actually want to pick it up and examine it. Who do they report it to? Do they report it to the city council, who have responsibility for the overall maintenance of the grounds? Do they report it to us because we have some responsibility on behalf of the city council? Do they report it to DEFRA? I suppose I just want a bit of a Janet and John, really, so I know if I'm asked by my residents. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, I understand what you're saying about there's too many people involved to a certain extent, but So DEFRA do all the testing to find out whether or not they've got the disease or not. So they're the ones taking the birds away, taking samples and doing the testing. So if a member of the public did find a dead bird, then it needs to be reported to DEFRA basically, whether or not, and then they will take action that they think is necessary. So it needs to be reported to them. Obviously our obligations in terms of the county council are just to keep people safe. If we're talking about a wild bird reservoir, for example, then putting notices up to stop the public, touching them. But the reporting should go to DEFRA, if that answers your question.
If I may just come back then, Chair, it would be really helpful on our blog that we put out, the County Council webpage. Can we actually do a small article on it? If it's happening in Ashfield at the Res and it's happening at Newstead Abbey, and Councillor Clark's expressed some concerns that it may be happening even in Rushcliffe. No boundaries, no borders. It'd be really helpful if we can put something out on our website. This is what you should do effectively. Phone deaf, because otherwise people will be phoning around the world wondering who to report it to. Responsible people will. If we could just put a contact phone number on that, and I'm assuming that our contact centre, if there's a call to the contact centre, we'll actually have that number available to them, either to make the call on behalf of a resident or to at least pass the phone number on to the resident. And likewise, I'm assuming again the City Council staff at Newstead Abbey Park, who actually manage the site, will have that same reference. That would just be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that. Also, I mean, obviously they can report any birds to us as well, but the mechanism is to go to DEFRA, but I can sort that out, make sure there's something out there. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Just a very, very tiny thing. I did mention to Fiona before about the Burton Joyce 3 at the moment that are stuck in the chicken house and can't get out. I just wondered if there was confirmation of the review period for how we review the avian alert and when that next review period is. Just as I said, just so I can pass that information on to them during feeding time. Thank you.
Well, there isn't any confirmation of a review period, unfortunately, for them. It's usually the zones get lifted in about May time, late April, May. I mean, it's just dependent on the disease and how it is going during the year, to be fair. But that's usually when it gets lifted. So, but I will let you know, or let them know when it's lifted for this year.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Williamson.
Sorry, just very quickly, seeing as we've come back onto it, I just wondered if it might be any use to us with the current situation at the moment, if the county council could or perhaps place some signage across some of our parks informing people in relation to contacting DEFRA that is who they need to get in touch with, obviously, rather than it coming through to local councillors or to this county or to the boroughs or anything. Is that something that we could do?
Do you want to come back on that, Fiona?
Yes, I mean, what's tended to happen so far is if there's been, a suspected outbreak in terms of birds have died, then notices have been put up then rather than notices before there's been a suspected outbreak. But we have a sort of set notice that I can send out to members if that's helpful for them. Like, if they want to put something up when there hasn't been a suspected outbreak.
That would be useful. Yes, it was just a question to see if it might be an idea for us to have them up most of the time. Then, obviously, just being slightly. I don't want to use the word reactive because that sounds negative, and I'm not being at all. I was just wondering if there might be any use to that. But I'll take the email and let's send that out to people as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any more questions or comments or? Nope. Birds, Fiona. We're concerned about birds. There's lots for you to do with birds. Thank you, everyone, for that. So recommendations have been put forward and seconded. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous, so that has passed. Thank you, everybody. So we'll move on now to agenda item 6, which is the Inspire Learning Annual Plan and fees. And before, I think it's Peter and Ian on this. Before that, I'll just read out the recommendations, which are on page 45. And they are that this committee notes the performance and outcomes during the 2020/21 academic year, approves the service plan for the 2022/23 academic year, approve the service plans for the use of the Education and Skills Funding Agency in the 2022/23 academic year, approves the schedule of fees as outlined in Appendix 1 to the report, and approves the supply chain arrangements for the 2022/23 academic year as outlined at Appendix 2 to the report. That is the proposal. Do I have a seconder?
Formally seconded and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Inspire Learning provides a range of learning courses for young people 16 to 18 and adults, both informal, unaccredited and accredited learning programmes. And that is delivered on behalf of the County Council by Inspire. And the majority of the work that we do is subject to Ofsted inspection. We're currently rated good. Ian Bond's attended today, and Ian's our Director of Learning and manages this aspect of Inspire services on behalf of the County Council. So this report outlines our performance during the 2021 academic year and gives you an update on the current academic year and our response to the pandemic. We're also seeking approval for the service plan for the coming year and approval for the expenditure through the County Council's award from the Education and Skills Funding Agency. We also seek approval for our schedule of fees, which are more detail about the changes are there in paragraph 7, 8 and 9. And our proposals are that the standard tuition fee of £4.50 be maintained, but that we apply the flexibility within the funding rules, that we reduce that fee to £3 for the period to be reviewed at each term. This allows us to respond to the cost of living challenges that we all face, but also in terms of rebuilding learner numbers following the pandemic, where we provided a range of online courses free of charge. We're also proposing that we would end the provision of free family learning courses and include them in the approach to the rest of our community learning provision. So family learners will therefore be able to have free courses as applied through the remissions policy outlined in Appendix 1. And the reality is for the majority of our current family learners, they will still receive those courses free. So that's the main changes outlined in terms of fees and charges, and then Appendix 2 outlines our supply arrangements, which we have to publish to meet funding regulations by the ESFA. So happy to take any comments, and of course Ian's here to answer any more detail. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Peter. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm always in favour of training and development of, I was going to say of young people, but actually of all age groups. I'm not a regular member of this committee, so I'm showing my ignorance to a certain extent. There's a lot of good news in paragraph 3 and a lot of positive deliveries. And I was just interested, the 4th bullet point that relates to traineeships. I was just interested to know, learn a little bit more about what actually are those traineeships, trainees in what capacity?
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I'll attempt to answer that. So traineeships are a national scheme introduced, I think, by the Coalition in the academic year, I think it was 2014-15. The idea of a traineeship is to act as a bridge for young people. It's a scheme that operates for young people, young adults aged between 16 and up to 24 years of age. And the idea behind it is that it allows a period of work experience for the young people so they can do that transition from finishing their course to actually then making the progression into employment. Unlike, say, an apprenticeship, which is actually a job with training attached, the traineeship is a more informal work experience placement. It's not paid. It lasts for a maximum of 6 months. The minimum duration is 70 hours in total. So the flexibility of delivery is very large deliberately so that it can fit around different sectors, different employers. And effectively, we as the learning provider support that young adult in terms of giving them, from finishing their course, the ongoing support, perhaps with any specific skills they might need to gain in order to help them make that transition. But we also work with the employer, find the work experience placement through the traineeship scheme, and then at the end of it, the hope is that they'll transition into paid employment, hopefully with, again, further training, probably through an apprenticeship. So that's the kind of how the traineeship scheme works in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. Cost should never be a barrier to education, and I'm pleased that this report recognises that. But I do have concerns about the refund policy. We only refund if the course we only refund if the cancellation of a course is because of low numbers. The appendix states that individual learners who choose to leave a community learning course before its completion will not be eligible for a refund. For me, that seems a little bit harsh, because what if somebody has to leave because they're ill, or other family circumstances that aren't just, or can't be bothered to turn up. So can I ask that this is removed and replaced with we will look at the reasons for the cancellation of a course and base each decision on its merits? Please. Thank you.
I think the reality of the practice on the ground is that the majority of our community learning is provided through remission, so it's very rarely an issue, and that the model that we have in terms of needing a certain level of learners on a course to make it financially viable is part of the reasoning around that refund. We would always look case by case, compassionately, on any circumstances, and often, I had it personally, where if you couldn't attend a course that you'd paid for, we often rerun those courses, so we would then offer them a place on those courses without extra charge. So we would do our best to meet the learning needs of the learner, rather than just because somebody couldn't turn up, we would give an automatic refund. So I think our approach is actually right, and I think quite flexible in terms of understanding those circumstances where learners can't access courses. I don't know if Ian, that's my view of it. I'm sure that you can clarify the practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can reassure Councillor Williamson that, as Peter says, it's in very few cases in which you would actually have circumstances where somebody didn't qualify for fee remission for a community course, and the course was cancelled for some other reason, or they ceased to attend, and that we would actually then, follow up and pursue them for the reimbursement of the course fee. In reality, that rarely, if ever, happens. However, I do take your point that that's not what the appendix says, so perhaps it should be worth us looking at that wording and just clarifying that situation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor and gentlemen. So I do feel satisfied that Inspire would take a flexible approach to this on a case by case basis. Perhaps wordings in future things can reflect that more so, because it is a positive. It's not a negative. But I do feel satisfied that Inspire would do those things. Are you happy with that, Councillor Williamson? Yep. Thank you. Do we have any more comments, queries? No, just a final one from me then, Peter. You said at the start when you introduced this about Inspire being flexible, and I was going to raise that as a positive, but I think literally just then that's an example, and I think a flexible institution is an institution that is incredibly positive, and I do think we need to recognise that Inspire is flexible, is mobile, and works with people, works with them, works for them. So. Well done on that point. If there's no more questions from committee, we've had the recommendation proposed and seconded, so we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous, so carried. And we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the Inspire Learning Annual Plan and Fees 2022. Oh yes, we've just done that one. You're quite right. Do you know, that's not bad, is it? 6 items before the first. That's not bad. I hope you're watching this, John, at home. Agenda item 7, statutory prevent duty. So I'll just read out the recommendation, which is on page 56, which is that this committee includes a further update on the prevent duty in its work programme, which is a very pleasant one to read. So that's the recommendation. Do we have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. So I think it's Lawrence for this one. Fantastic. Lawrence, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Very good. If you want to take this.
Yes, I mean, I haven't got much to add to what's in the report, but I'm very happy to take questions. I would just say before we start, we are very limited in terms of some of the detail that we're allowed to give in any kind of public forum because of the restrictions put on us by the Home Office and National Counter-Terrorism. So I'm very happy to take questions, but I apologise in advance if I have to not answer some of the detail if people want to get into numbers and some element of detail on cases, etc.
Do we have any questions or comments for Councillor Guilford?
Morning, Lawrence. Nice to see you. Just about member training, Lawrence, related to prevent and whether we're going to have an update on that. I've done that through, as a school governor, we all get training, and through Inspire. Again, we've had training on the prevent duty. Just in relation, I know there's some very easy training that you can do that's online, but I know there's a lot of members who don't like using online services for whatever reason, and didn't know whether there is a possibility of a training day. And that would also give you the opportunity in a training day and also in camera to probably explain a little bit more to members about some of the work that actually does happen and is going around.
Yes, the training is mainly online now. It is updated regularly because things change quite often. But I'm sure we can do something by way of briefing for members if people would like a little bit more of an in-depth look into how the systems around prevent more widely, contest strategy and the channel panel work. So we can certainly arrange that, and I can speak to community safety colleagues and see if we can put a briefing session on, a live one for members, if that's useful.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. Are you happy with that, Councillor Gilbert? Fantastic. Do we have any more questions or comments for Lawrence? No, easy one, Lawrence. So with that, then we've moved the recommendation, so we'll go straight to the vote. Then, all those in favour? Again, that is unanimous. So that has passed. Thank you for that, Lawrence. So we now move on to agenda item 8, which is the future options for catering, facilities management, and county enterprise foods. So this is being done by John and Derek, but just beforehand, the recommendation, which is on page 59, is that this committee approves the continuation of work to develop preferred options for the future delivery of catering and facilities management services. So that's the proposal. Do we have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. So on to John.
Good morning. This might seem slightly familiar, and that's what we'll work back, because this builds on a piece of work that was done in 2019 by SECO, which is part of CIPFA, and it's really, we've come back to really for an update today to let you know where we are. They've completed the first part of a piece of work for us to actually draw up a long list of options and to review all the finances and bringing everything back up to date from the full business case they did for us in 2018-19. And so really what we're seeking to do is to get permission to delve into that a bit deeper, if you like, and actually to bring out of it some, probably 1, 2 or 3 possibly final options that we can develop to a further degree, and to come back and make some recommendations as to what the future might look like, really. So we're not actually coming today to ask or seek anything on behalf of an option. We're really just asking for permission to continue the work and build on the work that SECO have done for us so far.
Thank you for that, John. Do we have any questions or comments for John? Councillor Guilford.
Yes, Chairman. Not going to obviously oppose the fact of looking at the best way to deliver this service. You should always review that. And clearly, there are a number of things that are laid down here. I did ask at the briefing that we kindly get from Derek at the time whether I could have a copy of the report that was published, that's mentioned in the report, and he said that was going to be sent on, and I haven't had a copy yet. I'm wondering if I could have a copy of that report, please. Yeah, clearly catering never came under communities previously. It was always under, I'm trying to think, highways or whatever, obviously. Pardon? It might have been personnel, yeah. Yeah, it was, I can't, yeah. So obviously, although I'm aware of reports have gone through previously, I'm not up to date on it. So from a personal point of view, if that's possible for me to have a copy of those reports. I mean, it does say, just to point out, that as would be background papers and documents that should be available for members to look at.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you want to come in, Derek?
We can certainly supply with the relevant information, Councillor Guilford, as we've discussed previously.
Any more questions or comments? Nope, spot on. So I think it's right, John, that in order to find the best options, as you say, we have to delve, we have to investigate. That's how you find the best things to do. So very happy to vote on this now. So if there's no more comments, a recommendation has been moved and seconded. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous and passed. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to agenda item 9, which is the pricing strategy for catering, facilities management and landscaping services. So the recommendation, which is on page 62, is that this committee approve the price increase at paragraphs 4 to 7 of the report to support the delivery of full cost recovery for the commercial services operated by the service. That's the proposal. Do we have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Is this John or Derek? John.
Morning again. So this is something we would have come back on a yearly basis with. I think the last time we came was 2 years ago, and so our prices have been pretty much fixed for 2 years in terms of during the COVID pandemic. I mean, and so in terms of what we're proposing at the moment is for schools, the paid school meals that's actually paid by parents to move from £2.35 to £2.40. And now that's the price that we actually charge the schools. It's not the price that the schools charge the parents necessarily, because that's a slightly more complex mathematical equation that they work out themselves, depending on their free school meals and things like that. Free school meals will be unchanged. It'll carry on exactly as at £2.35. And we're proposing an increase in FM of between 3.5 and 4.5 at the moment, which is, and all of those are really sort of very much commercial contracts that we have with everything, including the fire stations, etc. And all of the price increases today are all below inflation price increases. That's something else that we try to work on too. The final proposal we're making is with regard to county enterprise foods, and this increase once again is this is for our commercial customers. So we supply a lot of meals to some care home groups and things of that nature, and we have some private customers that come to us. So this doesn't actually actually impact on the adult social care clients that we've got. It actually is just for the commercial clients that we've got for the business. And we're proposing those increases are going to be between 5 and 8%, depending on who the customer is and what the actual supply is for that customer. And that's really all there is to it, really.
Thank you, John. Do we have any questions or comments from committee? None so far. If I could just ask, how does this compare to, say, neighbouring authorities? What's the kind of comparison?
We do actually do a lot of benchmarking. So we benchmark with 5 other county councils to try and get a benchmark across the board. And we're pretty much middle of the roading, I think we'd say. So we're slightly above, not Derbyshire, but we're actually well below others, other county councils, in terms of such as Hertfordshire and people like that. So I'd say we're pretty much middle of the road. And a lot of us are waiting to see what happens. We think there might be an increase in free school meal prices, which would be good because it would then mean that there'd be less pressure. I mean, there will be less risk with going forward in terms of inflation for the year too. So really, we do a lot of benchmarking across the board. So we're about middle of the road. We're not expensive, and we're not down the bottom end.
Thank you for that, John. Any additional comments from committee? Nope. So we've moved the recommendation, so we'll move on to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous, so that has passed. So agenda item 10, which is establishing the community early help and support team. The recommendations, which are on page 70, are that this committee approves the creation of a community early help and support team within the Trading Standards and Community Service. The establishment of a Bandy team manager post for the team to lead and drive community early help and support work for the authority, and moving existing relevant posts in the council's establishment to sit within the new team to maximise benefits of close collaboration. That is the proposal. Do I have a seconder?
Formally seconded and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think, Mark, you're taking this one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, yep, the report before you seeks approval to create a new team sitting within the Trading Standards and Community Service. As members will be aware, the response to the pandemic over the last couple of years has enabled organisations to identify more effective ways of working together. Some of that key learning is how much more can be achieved if different teams and organisations work in a more joined up way. So the proposal in front of you today is to start to bring together and align resource that sits within the council that's focused on providing community early help and support. That will enable pooling knowledge, relationships, funding, utilising the same systems. That will enable a more effective way that services work within the council, but also enable a more effective way the council can then join up with external partners too, who are also engaged in providing community early help and support. So far, there's 2 county council programmes of work that's been identified and associated funding that can be pooled to be the sort of the genesis of this new team. The community-friendly officers that already sit within their Trading Standards and Community Services in place, but also the local area coordination resource that's been established within the Adult Social Care and Health Department. So the report proposes that to start the team that we need to create a permanent team manager role and then move 8 existing roles to report into that team manager. So just before I finish, really to say that there are a number of other conversations going on across the authority to identify other community support resource or approaches that we could bring together in the team, or we could even create within the team as well. So this is the start of a new community help and support journey. And clearly would bring, if it approved today, would bring updates and seek decisions as appropriate going forward while we're on that journey. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions or comments from Councillor Guilford?
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, and thank you for supporting something I've been raising at this committee time on time about the community support that is needed, and a voice from this council, because that's important as well in communities, apart from just the voice that we have as local members. And also support for local members in their community when they're trying to get things done. So I'm really glad that is now coming into fruition. It would have been better if you would have supported our budget idea, because actually that would have doubled up on the number that you would have had here, because we were allocating approximately £1 million towards this scheme. And clearly for 400,000, you've got 1 in each district. It could have been 2. But nonetheless, we'll take what we've got. We think it's important that we do work with communities, especially because for the last 2 years, communities have not been able to mix and get out there, and a lot of volunteers that used to be, and a lot of voluntary groups have gone by the wayside. Tenants and Residents Association, and I'm hoping that some of these people will be able to drive them and get them back up and get back to communities meeting again. It would be good if at some point, Chairman, we get sort of the overview of that department, because clearly something again I support, where we're looking at what's being provided by adult social care and others, and bringing those together under one umbrella so that they can work together, is something I've always supported. It was one of the issues I once tried to get was there were a number of community advocates within highways who used to go to public meetings and whatever, and I was saying they should have been put together, so that it was, if we'd got a front-facing individuals, any front-facing individuals should be under that one umbrella. But it didn't happen, because there was at that time a strong chairman of highways who didn't really want us to sort of have that mix. But I'm glad that this is happening and that other departments. I think also one of the things, because later on the agenda is where we're actually, if we make the decision to, giving to various groups. I know particularly there's Ashfield mentioned, and I think Mansfield, where it's about financing them through the CVSs to develop more volunteer network. And I would hope that we can also write into their contracts for what we give them, that they also form part of the liaison with with the team as well. Because we're, clearly the County Council is funding them. They will be out there developing that, and I think that link would be very important for those people. One final thing, Chairman, is about where they will be based. Because clearly a job like that, for me, doesn't or shouldn't have to come in here. And I know we've got different ways of working now, but I didn't agree with the step officers at the time. Moved most of the people back into QB, into here, away from other workstations, and I think that they need to be out in the community, making those contacts, and as much as possible based in the community, and not having to say, if you've got someone who, and I'm hoping that recruitment is done on a basis where we get people who live in other areas taking up these roles. Not that everybody, sort of based in and around West Bridgeford ends up getting a job, and then we're sending them out to Bassetlaw to work. I want to see people locally in Bassetlaw get some of the, if there are people there with the skills, get the job, so that they're working in their local community as well. And I would presume the same in Broxtowe, Ashfield, and everywhere else. So where they're based would be, I think, is an important thing, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. A couple of questions for you there then, Mark, if you want to come back on them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is this is step one in a journey, and we'll continue to have lots of conversations with people across the authority to look at that idea of identifying all front-facing resource that does community support, with a view to looking at whether it's either based within or how we better improve the working together. That's ongoing. So the conversations, that are alive at the moment. Regarding the point around the CVSs and the funding that might be provided later on, and making sure that they're sort of formally linked into this, the working relationships that have been built through the pandemic has been absolutely fantastic, to be honest. And I don't think we need to almost make it formal. We can, and we will, or we can make it part of the agreements that we have with the CVSs. But we continue to meet regularly, and they're taking part in all of the conversations that are going on externally. We had a meeting last week in Mansfield, for example, where they were involved with that. So that will continue. In terms of where they're based and how they're recruited, in terms of the local area coordination model, there is a model there that's been tried and tested elsewhere across the country, where recruitment of the local area coordinators is done with the community, with community representatives. You're absolutely right in terms of they need to work, they need to build relationships in localities. Again, we're looking at all of that in terms of the flexible working model that the county council now operates. And so, yeah, those conversations are ongoing. The first step is to obviously get the team manager in place, agree the new structure, and then I will be having more and more conversations with adults colleagues about what the best model looks like going forward.
Thank you for that, Chairman. And there is just one point, and it's just me about, it's reasons for recommendation, and it's 30.37, and I just think that, can we use a bit better language? I want to know what they're going to be doing, what role they'll be doing, and that to me is a little bit officer speak. The team manager would weave together discrete work streams into a coherent approach to maximise the impact, synergy and shared learning while seeking opportunities to grow the approach. It's very nice language, Mark. I don't know. It weren't you that wrote that. I know that. I've seen your papers. No, but well, was it you, Derek? See, I know. Now, from a point of view of getting over to the public, that language doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't to me either. I'm straight John Bullers, at the end of the day. So, couldn't we have something that actually, when you've finally got the proper job description for what they're going to do, because this is going to be an important person in members' localities, I'm sure, and we really do need to know what their aims and objectives and what role they'll be playing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess that reflects the fact that this is emergent redesign going on at the moment, and there are still conversations going on with other bits, other potential resources in the county council to bring together. So it's not, and those conversations are very, very positive, but we can't actually yet, in a public forum, say if that will come forward or not. When that happens, yes, absolutely, we can be really clear on what the community's function, because again, the other thing is this is an additional team manager role, but to add into, there's an existing communities team manager there, and so once we know all of the responsibilities that will be asked to pick up, we can be much more certain in terms of what that might look like.
But the service director in what he's put there is not very clear and not very certain about what he was writing about.
I couldn't possibly say.
Thank you, Councillor. Just quickly picking up on your point about liking an overview of the team. I'm sure, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but once the team is up and running, no doubt we will hear from them within this committee and the works they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy for that to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you. Do we have any more comments or Councillor Williamson?
Thanks, Chair. I will be brief. Just two small. They have largely been touched on. Really, first one is I do echo Councillor Guilford's comment and the responses about them being locally based. And I know, obviously, in my own area, Ashfield, I know it's mentioned as a trial area. I'm certain that we'd be more than happy to provide some space for the teams while they get set up and make sure that it's integrated locally. And the second element of it was obviously with this being a new role coming in and working into the team, I am aware that these reports come back fairly regularly to us, but I was just wondering if it was possible to get a full report back in say 3 or 4 months after the person's been set up, and we are aware of where it is, and perhaps the role is a bit more concise and we know where we are with it, as I think it would be quite important for us in aiding understanding with the programme.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. So take on board the strong messages around being locally based, and that's always been the intention. Yeah, with regards to updates, we can either bring standalone reports, or as you obviously Fiona this morning presented the report that covers off the whole service, and we will put updates in there. This is clearly an important piece of work for the whole council as well. and how this community early help support embeds with other initiatives such as the children's hubs, etc. This is we're pushing to bring it all together, and I know that will be of a lot of interest to everybody here, and I'll make sure we update everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any more questions, Councillor Barnfather?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well protected, Mark. There, Derek Shakespeare at the front here. I thought you protected his integrity marvellously there. I welcome the report. I'm pleased to see that it's basically regularising what we already have in place to a degree of ad hoc posts across the council and putting them all under one structure, and that there is effectively no additional net cost to the authority, because it's actually the establishment of this team is already being met from existing Better Care Fund monies, and perhaps Councillor Guilfoyle will understand now why at the budget debate last week we didn't wish to accept the amendment from the Labour group, which would have effectively provided this service but would have taken £1 million out of reserves to do so. We already, of course, had this in place, so I know, I appreciate, Glyn, that you obviously welcome it, as indeed we all do, and I see this will work really well with some of the district council neighbourhood locality officers that we have, particularly in our more deprived areas, like in Gedling, for instance, in Killissick and in Newstead Village. I work very closely with the district council officer who performs this type of role on behalf of the district council, and I have to say, when they first came in, there was a little bit on my part of, hang on a minute, isn't that my job? I'm the local member. But the reality of it is that because they're able to dedicate that officer time during the course of the week, rather than light on it periodically, which we do as elected members, it provides a much more supportive infrastructure for the communities and pulls all those different local groups together. So I welcome the report, I welcome the way in which it's being funded, and look forward with interest to see the results in due course.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Mark, I don't suppose you need to come back in on that?
No, I think that there's no answers required there, but thank you for the support.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, queries? Nope. I will just say, Mark, I think the fact that we are literally having to pull together this new team does show some of the scale of our ambition, that some of our aims, that we literally need people together in the same room to do that. So I think that's a real positive of this department and of the staff. So with that, then the recommendation has been proposed and seconded, and we'll move to the vote. So all those in favour? And that is unanimous, so that has passed. Thank you very much. Item 11, the Local Communities Fund. So page 77 of the report, and the recommendation is that this committee approves £1,280,563 worth of applications for funding as recommended at Appendix 1 to the report. And I think, Mark, you're taking this one again.
If I may formally second and reserve the right to speak.
It's a long meeting, Chris, I'm afraid. I've run out of coffee, actually, so thank you for that, Mark.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yep, so the report in front of you seeks approval for, say, £1.28 million worth of funding to support the voluntary community sector as part of the new fund. Members will recall that the Local Communities Fund is a 4-year programme, and it's got a number of important elements to it. There are 2 rolling annual elements. Firstly, the small revenue grants for up to £5,000, and then secondly, the second rolling element is capital grants up to a maximum of £20,000. There's also a commitment to a 4-year continuous revenue grant funding for those longer term and more established projects. And then finally, of course, is the annual Talented Athletes programme that's in this new iteration is being expanded. Just to say, there's been an excellent response from the community, as you would expect, to the opening of the programmes. We've had 95 applications for revenue funding, 12 for capital and 77 for Talented Athletes funding. And they asked in total for 2.8 million which is obviously in excess of the budget that we had. So lots of work and careful thought has been undertaken to identify those applications that should be funded and also to what level they should be funded. And the appendix to the report sets out the recommendations based on that analysis. And the final point to make is that the capital fund still has a significant number of applications that are still under consideration that will be brought back and presented to a future committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Just before I open it up to the committee, I just want to say to the team, Mark, this is a real slog of a job, and I think you've all done fantastically going through group after group after group after group after group, working through it. So if you could just pass on, again, our thanks to everyone involved. With that, is there any questions for Mark, any comments? Councillor Guilford.
Chairman, always welcome the funds that we're giving to the voluntary sector. But I've just got a little bit of concern because in reality, we've talked in this committee about sustainability for voluntary organisations over the piece. But the core funding for some of these, and I know just on the bid that I sort of got my name attached to and supported, which for Citizens Advice Bureau, it's under the name of Broxtowe, and it was a joint bid for all the CABs for their core funding costs. Their core funding costs for the previous 4 years was £180,000. This time, for the 4 years, we've given them £149,000. Now, that's a distinct reduction in their core funding. It's, now I could support if we'd have turned around and said, well, we're going to give you the same as what you had in the last 4 years, or we're going to give you the same plus inflation, because clearly one of the problems that they will have as well is, like a number of organisations, they've also got to take in to account inflation and the rising national insurance costs. And in reality, that could mean a real net cut to those organisations. And it's not just one, it's right across the board. They will share that out, but a real net cut to about £44,000. That's not including the insurance costs. So I've just got to, and I don't know, because I've not really looked at some of the other organisations. I mean, some of the smaller ones, I know they've had a reduction on what they've had in previous years. But again, I think there was another bid put in for all the CVSs as a total, as opposed to individual ones come in, and that's good because that shows, that they're working in partnership, as Mark has been saying. And I'm not sure whether they ended up in when it's come out with a reduction again. So I'm just a little bit in my own concern that we've, at a point where, in particular, CABs and the major VCSs in particular, where they will be picking up a lot of work which is what they've done over the last couple of years, but even more so with the pinch that's coming on with everything, and that's not just inflation; it's what's going off in the rest of the world. There will be a lot more people turning to CAB for advice and assistance, and they're not getting the core costs. Now, I know in other areas where they've bid for, because they've been, encouraged to, and we've encouraged, and everybody said, well, if you want to develop further areas, there is some pots of money where you can develop further areas. And I know some of them, there's X amount of money for increasing the number of volunteers that they've got. That's needed anyway, and I spoke about that earlier. But what I'm finding is that there is a real cut across the board to the core funding of those services. Now, I don't think that members here have done that deliberately. I don't think that's been picked up. I hope that's the case. I hope members didn't understand that, didn't understand that. It's only because of the work that I do with the CABs and that I've got knowledge of that, and also a visit that I'm doing with Councillor Cotty next week, if he's well, where I sort of got all the funding for the various local groups that we're going to visit, so he could see the impact that the County Council and the help and assistance that the County Council is giving to the voluntary sector in just in particular in Bassett Law, but then a little bit of a shock when it seemed that they were going to get a reduction on their core funding. I hope that that can be took away today to be re-examined and looked at, because I would have hoped that we could at least give them the same core funding what they've had in previous years, with a little bit for inflation. If that's not the case, if it's not going to be reviewed, then I particularly can't support this paper at this time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Guilford. Mark, would you like to come back with some technicals?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sure. Not an easy process when you have a budget to work to, clearly, and but what I will say, there's lots of thought, lots of hard work has gone into coming up with the best way to allocate the same level of revenue funding as was done previously. But I think, as you said earlier, Councillor Guilford, the world has moved on through the pandemic. It's changed. There's lots of relationships that have grown. There are some groups have fallen away. There are others that have come forward. So there was lots of, work done in the background to try and work out the best allocation of funding. Lots of different modelling was undertaken as well. And a choice was the numbers that have been worked up was around looking at giving a lower percentage of money to more people than giving a higher percentage to a fewer number of people. So that's the recommendations in the report is based on that approach, and it's been done to the best possible ability of the team. Have done a lot of work around this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. If I could just jump in as well. You said initially we had just over 2 million requests for funding. What was the number? Sorry, was it 2 point something?
2.8 million.
So 2.8 million requests for funding, and our pot is essentially 1.2 million. That's correct, isn't it?
For the revenue side of it,
yeah.
Yes, there's then the capital of 500,000 on top.
Yeah. So we would love to be able to give as much money as is possible, but the nature of a finite pot, I suppose, is that you have to make the decisions on where to go, and we have decided to spread it across as many groups as we can cover. So everyone or nearly everyone gets something. It may be less than they want, but they are still getting something, rather than a smaller number of groups getting more money. I suppose that's the conscious decision of the team, and it's a very hard decision to make, absolutely. But that is the nature of decision making when you've got a finite pot of money and so many worthy community groups requesting funds from that. Councillor Barnfather?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on your point, really, there is a finite pot of money. We would love that there was more money available. We'd be delighted if we had been able to meet all these very worthy voluntary sector groups who've asked for, whatever amount they've asked for. If we'd been able to meet all their demands, that would have been fantastic. But we're not in that financial situation, and it's not actually quite as cut and dry, as black and white maybe as it looks on a piece of paper, because at the end of the day, you have to make choices. So we could have given the Citizens Advice Bureaus the full 250,000, was it, that they asked for, 275, something like that. But if we'd have done that, we would have had to say, perhaps we didn't give the Bassett Law Action Centre anything, or the Bassett Law Community and Voluntary Service anything, or the Focus on Young People in Bassett Law anything, or some of the Ashfield groups anything. You have to make a choice. There are no easy decisions here, and you have to also look beyond this headline figure, and I appreciate that Councillor Guilford used the term core funding, because core funding actually is only one element of funding. For instance, the Citizens Advice Bureaus have had £374,000 over the previous 2 financial years in additional funding to their core funding, using COVID response and recovery funds. That's £374,000 on top of the £180,000 that they received in the last medium-term awards. And if you move to the next item on our agenda today, to item 12, you'll see there that there is a paper on the Social Recovery Fund. And if you look, there are awards within that paper, which is a separate pot of money on top of the £150,000 we're being asked to agree today, which gives the best part of another £100,000 to the Citizens Advice Bureaus to deal with those elements. So it's not quite as simple as on core funding, £150,000. We ask for 250, we can't cope. This is the way government funding works nowadays. This is the way we have to operate. There are lots of different pots of funding. You cannot take that local community funding in isolation. You have to look at the bigger financial picture. I appreciate it may not be what the cabs wanted. It may not be totally what the cabs needed, but they haven't done too bad out of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson, did you raise your hand? Apologies.
No, that's fine, Chair. And obviously, first of all, thank you and the entire team for the work you've done. I do echo, I believe it was your comments, Councillor Smith, that this is obviously a very large piece of work that you've done. And obviously, we are in support of it. The money's not as much as I think any of us would like to give in an ideal world, but at the moment we are where we are, and I would rather more organisations got it than not. Really, my questions revolve around the groups that haven't been approved for funding, and I appreciate it's something that couldn't be brought in this paper, as we are actually approving this ourselves today. But from a budget of 2.8 million requested down to 1.2 given, obviously all of that isn't just in a reduced award where somebody's applied for say 100,000 and only got 70. There have clearly been applications that have been rejected for various reasons. So I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it back to a future committee or just to circulate via email, but I would be very interested to see the amount of applications that have been turned down and the reasons why they have been turned down for what part of the criteria that they didn't fit. So if I could make a formal request for that information, it would be very muchly appreciated. And I think it would really aid in aiding with the paper and understanding where the money has gone.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Yeah, that is something we could look into. Mark, do you want to just come in and expand on that a bit?
Yeah, that's fine. We can bring back and share that information. And just regarding the process this time around, just to make it really clear that for all the larger, the 4-year revenue applications over 5,000, they were all given the same percentage. So there's not only the Citizens Advice Bureau, but other applicants. They were all of their applications have been reduced by exactly the same amount. And just to pick up on, what a point Councillor Guilford made earlier, the CVSs this time round have got a larger amount of money than they would have received last time round, and because it is a fixed pot, if you give more to one, it ends up naturally others will get less. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Williamson, what we can do, rather than bringing it back in report form, we can just send it out directly to members of this committee as well. Do we have any more queries, comments, points? No? Very well. All good. So with that, the recommendation has been put forward and it's been seconded. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you very much. So that is passed. Thank you. And then we move on to item 12, which is approval of applications to the COVID Partnership Social Recovery Fund and the Community Hub Food Plan. The recommendations for this is page 93, and they are that this committee approves the applications for funding as recommended at Appendix 1 to the report and reviews those applications that have received partnership approval as set out at Appendix 2 to the report. That is the recommendation. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mark, this one is you again, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I just have a few IT issues. Yeah, the report in front of you, you've seen the similar reports before, where you've been receiving progress reports regarding these two funds. You'll recall that applications over £5,000 need approval of this committee for both the Social Recovery Fund and the Food Fund. Applications for 5k could be approved by members of the local Resilience Forum Humanitarian Assistance Group, but then brought to this committee for oversight. Appendix 1 details those projects reviewed and endorsed by this partnership for over 5,000, brought for approval today. So there's a total of 491,000 for the Social Recovery Fund, and 106,632 for the Food Fund. And then Appendix 2 details those projects 5k or under that have already been approved, and they total 9,000 for the Social Recovery Fund and 11,000 for the Food Fund. If all applications are approved today by committee, all of the £1.5 million of Social Recovery Fund and also 800k of the Food Fund would have been applied. As ever, happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. Do we have any comments or questions or clarification points for Mark? No, straightforward. Easy peasy. Well done, Mark. With that then, we've had the recommendation, we've had the seconder, so we'll move straight to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous, so that has passed. On to item 13, which is Nottinghamshire Household Support Fund progress. The recommendations for this is on page 107, and that is that this committee approves that a further report be brought to the next committee to update and ratify the finishing position of the scheme. And Mark, this is you again.
Great, thank you, Chair.
No, apologies. That is a recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So again, members will recall the papers previously brought to committee on the Household Support Fund. This one sets out the progress that's been made since the last meeting, and outlining further spend and activity that's taken place since. Just to say, we continue to work with partners to ensure that the fund is deployed by the end of March. We're in the final stages now. Since this report was drafted, obviously things have moved on again at speed. So just to give a few updates, the funding provided to schools, early years and eligible colleges for half term. So that's the vouchers for free school meals. That was doubled and deployed at 985,000. And with regards to paragraph 14, where we talk about other support provided, as of the 7th of March, households have received a total of just over £2 million, split between 1.29 million for food and 710,000 for energy. Allocation of funding as it stands is approximately gone 2/3 to households with children, 1/3 to households without children, which meets the government requirement that at least 50% goes to households with children. With regards to the essential domestic appliances, which are set out paragraph 18, we're now at a value of having supplied 92 appliances to a value of 23.4 thousand. Members will recall that in January, the scheme was opened to take applications directly from individuals. This proved extremely popular, and we had about 2,000 submissions in quite a small space of time. Due to the level of demand, we had to pause this element of those applications. The vast majority of the backlog have now been processed, where we've had the full information provided on eligibility. There are still a few minor ones outstanding, but we have now, worked our way through the backlog. As of today, though, and given the current recent levels of spend and what we predict in the final few weeks, we believe the fund will be fully spent by the end of March, just based on those referrals that are coming in from professional referrers. So that's within the county council and within partner agencies. So we're not in a position to reopen the scheme to those self-referring. That may change, but our assessment at the moment is that that would be unlikely. We continue to have conversations with partners for possible contingencies to ensure full spend. We've got some uncertainties at the moment in terms of some people we allocate vouchers to have let them expire. which means we get money washing back in a few weeks down the line. And so we're keeping an eye on what that looks like. So yeah, that's the update for the moment. And as ever, happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Just before I open it to committee, this is only it's only a 6-page report, and a lot of figures and tables, and it's very easy to just kind of skim over it. But actually, if you delve into it and actually look at what we're doing as a committee and as a council, we're actually doing huge amounts of community work for people that actually need it. And I think it's really important to get this message out there that we are actually doing, frankly, we're doing shed loads for these communities. And it's a real shame, actually, that it is figures, because obviously it's harder to get excited by figures, isn't it, and to shout about it. But if you actually break this down, I mean, 2.7 million worth of food vouchers that we got out, that is phenomenal. And I really do think that we need to take a moment just to think about the logistics and the work that we do and the team that does it. It really is impressive. Apologies for that slight little vent, but no, I think it's fantastic, really, and I really do wish that more people would read the reports. So with that, we'll open it onto questions from the committee. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose a little bit, I actually quite like the tables. I do love the report. There's got a lot of numbers in, and thank you again, Mark, for the work. I do think obviously it's largely positive, and I'm happy that we are providing for a lot of those really need. Not to sour it at all, but on paragraph 12 under other support, obviously we have the table here and all the revised amounts. We have everything. Cass and I, we've doubled from the original amount offered. We've doubled it in January, from the 24th of January onwards, responding to the issues raised by partners. Could you just give me a bit of specificity about what the issues raised were? Was it simply just that it wasn't generous enough, or what the issues were that were raised that caused us to decide to double the amounts we were offering? Other than that, I do fully support the report, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williamson. Yeah, so I think I've reported previously we have a weekly steering group meeting of partners, including all the district borough councils, etc., Job Centre Plus. And so we've been constantly looking at the data and predicting on how we get all of the money out by the end of March in a way that's compliant with the rules that the government have set for the fund. So it was looking at that and then deciding with partners how would we best apply the funding. And it was felt that from all the feedback that in order to do that, to make sure that we applied all of the budget, that we doubled, we gave more out to those people that were coming through. The issues are around the ability to be able to, as a partnership, to be able to deal with the levels of people coming forward and demand, and what the need was that they were coming forward. So it was felt that having the higher levels of coupons or vouchers available would be better meet the needs of people out there, as well as deploying all the funding. Because, as I say, there's been a lot of uncertainty right through this, and you have to keep adjusting, making adjustments all the way through, and that was what that was about. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. Are you happy with that, Councillor Williamson? Do we have any more questions, comments? Councillor Guilford.
Yeah, we cannot sort of ignore the impact that this has had on the local communities, and the support that's been needed out there during this particular period. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we've spent 5 million on currently over 5 million, 5.5 million plus on the support, and we're only just at the start now of what could be an even more severe crisis. And I don't know, I've not seen anything that signifies that there'll be another fund like this available for us to give to those suffering. And I'm I just know that there's going to be a lot more people suffering, a lot more people. You know, you just heard about the cost of rising oil, and it's doubled just on eating costs, and that, you know, and that in some cases will also not just be people who are already in positions of being not very well off. There'll be people who are have been comfortable who will now not be very well off because of those fuel prices and everything else that's coming. So I'm just concerned what we've got there for the future, Chairman, and what will be coming in the next couple of years, and hope that the government do see fit to passport down a similar amount of money to enable us to passport that through, or even a greater amount of money, because I think it'll take more than this 5.5 million to cover the problems that we've got in the future in Nottinghamshire.
Thank you, Councillor. Mark, do you want to come back on any of that?
Well, just to say, in terms of the, I've not heard that there will be funding after the 1st of April. So that at the moment, I don't believe there is a similar scheme that will be coming along, although often a number of these have come at fairly short notice, but at the moment, I don't think there is one.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to thank the officers for all their hard work on this report, and make some comments on this agenda item. I would like to remind colleagues of some of the statistics that I mentioned in my budget speech of the support that children and their families have received. Such as our work with schools, we have distributed more than 183 free school meals vouchers for eligible children during the school holidays, providing more than 1.7 million meals for children, school-aged children, and around 257,500 meals for preschool children. We've provided vouchers for more than 2,000 2 to 4-year-olds from low-income groups through private, voluntary or independent childcare providers for the summer holidays, equating to more than 50,000 meals. And we have also allocated £11,528 towards the Holiday Activity and Food Fund. This is just a few of our achievements that I'd like to mention. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. It's no bad thing, I think, for us to talk about all the achievements we do. So much of what happens behind the scenes or behind closed doors, and I think it's very important to bring that out and say, actually, a lot of good is happening all the time. So to highlight that is very welcome. Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I hear what Councillor Guilfoyle says, but I think the paper before us is quite specific, as at bullet point 2. That this is to support those in immediate need as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. So we have to deal with what's before us at the time, and I appreciate, you know, there are circumstances that will arise. We're seeing circumstances as, you know, if we're talking crisis, a crisis is the Ukraine. There are circumstances arising in this country with cost of living issues, which we will address as they continue to affect us. But I actually speak to thank officers. It's very easy for politicians to say, didn't we do well, whether it be central government in the allocation of this money in the first place, or whether it be us as elected members at Nottinghamshire County Council in formulating a policy in how we might wish to see that money spent. But the reality of it is, it isn't us on a day-to-day basis that are dealing with it. And I think you made the point, Chairman, you have to look at the statistics in this, the data in this, and it is absolutely overwhelming. You know, we received this £5.6 million in autumn. We had to spend it by the end of March of this year. Now, that is not a lot of time. It's a short period of time if you're allocating £5.6 million to one individual or one organisation. If you're allocating that £5.6 million to a formula that you don't even know, that you have to come up with, and you have no idea on day one of exactly how many people will qualify or apply for that funding, it is a massive logistical exercise. I just look at some of the stats in here. As at 23rd of February, 21,400 21,428 households have been provided with support. 21,428 households. That is a huge logistical exercise. The flexibility that's been displayed by officers. So if a particular household, for instance, didn't have a payment method that allowed us to allocate funding in relation to energy, the way that we would have been able to be flexible, or officers have been able to be flexible, to actually replace energy support with food support. When you look at the number of households who 2,000 households requested support from the fund in the first 2 weeks, individual applications to the fund. Enormous statistics, enormous numbers of residents of Nottinghamshire that have been supported by central government, by this council, but most importantly by officers working long hours to be able to make sure that the money is passported through us and delivered to the people that need it at the time they need it. So my thanks to officers, and I hope you'll pass that on to your staff, Mark.
Thank you, Councillor. Nail on the head there, I think. Yes, Mark, if you could pass all that on to officers. Do you have anything you'd like to come back on with Councillor Barnfather?
Well, just to say, no, I mean, thank you for that. There's the team that's leading this are really good, brilliant, dedicated, hardworking, passionate about what they do. They think a lot, and they are spending long hours dealing with a lot of work. So they will really appreciate that thanks, and I will take that back and thank them and also everybody else within the community's function for what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any more comments, queries? Nope. So with that, then we will. We've had the recommendation for proposed and seconded. We will now move to the vote. So all those in favour? That is unanimous. So that is passed. So we're now on to agenda item 14, which is the final point of the day. So the work programme. The recommendation is on page 110, and that is that this committee approves the work programme and considers whether there are any changes that the committee wish to make. Derek, would you like to, any comments you've got to make?
Only to invite members to let us know if there are any other items that they wish to see placed.
Thank you. Do we have any comments? Or
just the prevent training, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I've noted it already.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Guilford. What we'll probably do is follow that up separately outside of the committee, so I'll pick that up with Lawrence.
Do we have any more comments, queries? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Just particularly in light of today and some of the funding that we have approved, I would reiterate a call that I've made previously. If we could find somewhere to start looking into a programme that rewards all the talented artists across the county, as well as the talented athletes programme, and something in that regard would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Derek, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. We've got a report coming up on the for the April meeting, the annual report from Inspire. And Inspire is the charitable organisation, as you know, that delivers a lot of our arts-related activities. So I'll pick that issue up with Peter so that we can touch on it in the context of that report in April.
Thank you, Derek. Are you happy with that, Councillor Williamson? Any more comments, queries? No. So we've had the proposal proposed and seconded. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So that has passed. And that then takes us towards the end of the meeting. Councillor Darby, I hope you've enjoyed your first Communities Committee. If I can just take a very brief moment just to say to councillors, in just shy of 2 hours, we have just allocated just shy of £2 million worth of funding there. So that is not a bad way to spend a Wednesday morning, I think. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will close the meeting.